Hi everyone and welcome to our first Zoom chat on SA Rugby Mag. I'm here with colleague Wade Pretorius. Wade, how are you managing in lockdown?
Yeah, it is what it is, Craig. Trying to keep busy, keep active. Fortunately, we do have some rugby tidbits to talk about and to keep us going. Obviously, there's loads of information on the website, which is great. And yeah, Craig, why don't you tell us what our readers can look forward to once you have that cup of tea to look forward to on the website today?
Yeah, well, probably one of our more popular pieces, and we've been quite impressed to see that there is still quite a strong readership and following, and we've been trying to keep things quite active on the website, and obviously it's a time where there's no live sports to write about, but it's provided an opportunity to really look back at some of our favourite memories from the past, and a popular insert has been our selection of our Boks dream team, and you and me have been debating and arguing quite a bit. So I think let's look at our Boks 23s and the talking points there. I've just got it up on screen here, having a look. So at fullback, we both went for Percy Montgomery, which I think was the obvious selection at fullback. And then wingers, we differed in the sense that I went for Colby and you went a little bit left field with the James Small selection.
Yeah, for me, I think that looking back over all the years of rugby, we need to remember the guys that were good during the early years of pro rugby. I mean, we've got a lot of guys during our team are heavily weighted into the more modern era, starting from the Victor Matfield guys like that and moving on. So James Small for me was one guy that played a massive part in making early pro rugby a success. He was obviously very, very good during the 95 World Cup with those tackles on John Olomu, and he was the original bad boy. So I think for me, he left a lasting impression and was one of the original pro rugby adopters that stood out for me. And he got my nod. I've got Colby on my bench, which we can talk about later. Obviously, he was in such fine form pre-lockdown, and I just think that coming off the bench, I mean, who better than Cheslin Colby?
Yeah, for sure. I think we had no debates around the midfield. I mean, Jean de Villiers, Jacques Fourie, undoubtedly the best midfield combination that the Boks have probably ever produced, certainly since rugby went pro. But what I thought, and then again, we all agreed on left wing, Brian Abana has to be included there. So those were easy selections, but quite an interesting talking point I thought was at fly half, and that I had to puzzle quite a bit to really settle on who I wanted there. Obviously, options would have been Henry Honeyball, Mornay Steyn, maybe a younger generation, Andre Pollard, but it kind of pointed out to me that we've never had a really dominant, like automatic pick at fly half. If you're looking at the All Blacks, obviously you go Dan Carter. If you're Australia, you got obviously Stephen Larkham. If you're England, you got obviously Johnny Wilkinson. But we haven't really had a number 10 that has like been the most world-class player in world rugby over a long period.
Yeah, we haven't, and that's why I went with Mornay Steyn, the reliable option. I mean, I'm looking at my 23 as a full team, and I felt that Mornay Steyn obviously offered me that dependability. He was a rock. His boot was incredible. He also is able to play to the game plan and sturdy on defense. I looked at every player in the fly-off berth, and I can remember a few bad games that they've had. Obviously, Butch was a great player, World Cup winner, struggled with his defense at times, particularly with his head-eye hits. I hope that my memories were a bit skewed of Honeyball during the 97 British Lions tour, where I felt that he had a few bad games where he was a bit one-dimensional at times. Obviously, he was a feared defender too. And Pollard, I feel like maybe this one is a bit too soon. I think that in 4 years' time, if he keeps injuries at bay, he will be our Dan Carter, our Johnny Wilkinson, our Ronan O'Gara. I mean, almost every country in the world has had a 10 that has stood out. We haven't. Mornay Steyn, maybe slanted also with those too many Bulls highlights of that when I was compiling those Super Rugby memories of the 3 super titles in 4 years. I mean, he was one heck of a player, and he wasn't as one-dimensional as most fans, especially those who aren't Bulls faithful, would have to believe.
Yeah, and then we had a little bit of an argument or banter around our selection at flank. At least, obviously, we had Skalkberger and Dwayne Vermeulen in that loose trio, but at 7, you went for probably the obvious choice in the current sense of how good Peter Pretorius has been, whereas I was swayed towards John Smith, more of the old school generation, a bit of a legendary blindside who had his obviously that massive injury problem with the Achilles heel and then had the miraculous comeback. But for me, he was just that, kind of one of the earlier Boks after, after things went pro. And I just think he was ahead of his time, a proper legend of Bok rugby. And you kind of felt differently that Peter Pretorius had to be included.
Yeah, I mean, this is what it does. It brings out, I mean, we try and be as objective as we can, but there's certain subjective elements. Make no mistake, John Smith was one of my favorite players. I mean, he was an absolute beast. He was a turbo. He had everything. He was so strong. His ball carrying was destructive. His defense was almost unrivaled. But I think I was just swayed with a little bit of Peter Stepp's versatility, the fact that he's been on the scene for a staggering amount of time, even though some of his rugby was played at lock. And for a guy that's just so dominant right now, maybe that's where that whole memories fading versus what you know right now. I mean, for the last 2 years, Peter Pretorius has been one of the best on the planet.
Yeah. So I look at our top fives then. I think we all had the same sort of thought process. Obviously, Bucky's and Victor, obvious selections in the second row. And then we both went with the All Sharks front row of the Duplessis brothers and Beast. So, I mean, that kind of shows the strength we've had in that forward pack. I mean, those guys kind of pick themselves. Obviously, the one talking point is whether you get an Osterrand in there instead of Beast. But, I mean, it's hard to choose between Beast and Ost because, I mean, both those guys are World Cup winners, legendary players in their own right. They played at different generations, but I look at the way Beast started out his career, and I wrote about recently, one of my best memories was his demolition of Phil Vickery, and then when he retired in his final test in the World Cup final, he was just as dominant. I just think the way he maintained his longevity, he was the ultimate professional. He looked after his body. I don't think we're going to see many players that are quite able to perform in that front row for such a long period of time. But it's taking nothing away from Ors, because obviously he was recalled and won another World Cup when many thought, he was too old to do so. So, I mean, great options there at 1.
Yeah, I mean, those options. I think the big talking point that we somehow both agreed, and we hardly ever agree on everything, is John Smith. Obviously, he was the very inspirational captain. And we've both gone Bismarck to start, and we've both gone Malcolm Marx on the bench. So I know that was a talking point. A lot of guys would favour John Smith, but I loved Bismarck's brute force. I feel like if it was straight playing ability and taking leadership out of the equation, obviously you can't, because I mean rugby needs captains, it needs leaders, and Smith, some of his leadership won us key games and played a massive role in the World Cup. But Bismarck was one of the most feared players in the world. So if you're going to take a guy that New Zealand hated playing against, who would they prefer to play? They'd prefer to play John Smith. So therefore, we had to go with Bismarck. And Malcolm Marx, he's lost his place to Bongi Mbonambi, which is another talking point. And we both got him on the bench. But I think for me, Marx coming off the bench adds a lot of value, where I have absolutely no problem with Bongi starting in this current setup. He's earned his place, and he's done phenomenally well to dislodge Marx from the starting lineup. And that's something that I've been talking to you about in the office for ages. Just that, I mean, that's a feat to take Malcolm Marx out of the starting lineup. So we've obviously been blessed with lots of players. We're arguing about a bunch of guys that are all 10 out of 10s, like Beast or Us. Like, I mean, there's almost no point. We've got them both on our sides, so I sleep peacefully at night,
Yeah. So, I mean, it has been a good debate generator on the site, but, I think we've seen the quality of players that South African rugby has produced, which has been quite fun to actually look back. Obviously, we're running now, finishing up our World 15 selection, so maybe our next chat we can get into that, but maybe we just wrap this chat on a couple of new snippets that came out yesterday. A guy that I had on my bench, Van Steen, returning to the Cheetahs in Bloemfontein. I mean, that's quite interesting to see him coming to finish his career in South Africa. And then just a bit of rumoured or reported news is that SA Rugby hoping to resume competition in early June. Just your thoughts on Fransstein and whether you really think that some form of domestic competition can get going in about a month and a half.
One I'm super positive about, the other I'm quite negative about. Fransstein coming back to South Africa, that's a boost. I mean, the Cheetahs are a franchise that are kind of fallen out of the spotlight, as you were, because of the Pro 14. You know, they play at different times, not only daytime and nighttime, but overseas. And the Pro 14 isn't as glamorous as Super Rugby. And while that's a good move for the Cheetahs, because they were obviously bumped from Super Rugby, it's phenomenal. I mean, I'm looking forward to Fransstein reigniting something in the Cheetahs. He brings with him a wealth of experience, and he's probably got 2 great years left to offer. I know that the Cheetahs will be hoping to keep him in the system when the day does come that he hangs up his boots. And he is one guy that will go down as probably the one Springbok that should have played the most games. The fact that he came on into the scene in 2007 as a World Cup winner and won it again, but albeit in a bit part role as a specialist. So Rassie definitely saw value in him, and I'm looking forward to what he brings to the Cheetahs fraternity going forward. As for your second point about early June start, I think that it would be wise and prudent for rugby organising bodies to plan for all scenarios, and that's what they're doing. And obviously this is best case is June. I mean, we saw with Australia, they penciled in the start of their All Aussie Derby for April.
Yeah.
That was proven to be so far off the mark. It's frightening. And I just think that in this environment, I mean, it's something the world's never faced before. We need to see caution, and there's so many moving parts and so much information that medical professions and that kind of thing. There's so many clearances and so many logistical hurdles. Even if you take it into like a lockdown environment where guys come in, play, don't come in, there's still so many moving parts in rugby. Coaches, physios, other technical staff, players, injuries, guys coming in. What happens if someone has a family emergency and they want to go out? That's a 2-week break. If 2 or 3 players need to go and do that, a player's wife gives birth, etc. There's so many moving parts. How do you keep a safe environment? In the times of COVID-19? I don't see it happening. I know that we need to be positive and we need to give our readers and people reason to look forward to sport, because it does bring us so much joy. But I do think that it's got to be safety first. And I would be looking at, I mean, if Wimbledon is cancelled, and that was the 29th of June, there's no ways that we're going to have local rugby in June. I just don't see it. I'm hopeful, and I'll humbly eat my words, but I think we need to be looking at August, September.
Yeah, I think the difference with that probably is one tournament being an international one, where you got obviously overseas travel having to be required for a sports event like Wimbledon to go ahead, filled with all different international competitors. A local competition here, if we can obviously see that the lockdown has an effect, and in a month and a half they can restart some form of South African competition, one that takes place after lockdown has ended. That's obviously a best case scenario, but it would, like you say, have to surely be played behind closed doors, which is another factor to think about. I mean, that's not great for the players to play in front of empty stadiums. It's not really what sport is about, but it's the only way I can see some form of action is if there are a limited, let's say, how many people would need to be at a ground. It would be under 100. All those players get tested and the support staff, and then they play some sort of game like that in front of no fans. But I mean, that's not an ideal scenario, but it's the only way I can see some rugby being played, to at least give the broadcasters and sponsors some kind of rugby. So we'll have to wait and see on that one.
I wonder, do we play rugby for rugby's sake? I mean, an empty ground with pretty low grade TV coverage. I mean, is that the rugby that we're after? How do we guarantee everyone's safety in that thing, from the people who set up for the game to the players themselves, obviously, because they're the marquee event in it. How do we guarantee their safety? Are players going to be happy with it? I know everyone's keeping fit and they're raring to go, obviously, because we all are. But this is one thing where like less professional sport has a bigger advantage over such a professional thing. I mean, can the powers that be guarantee everybody's safety? And that's the only time that they will resume rugby. Imagine what the PR crisis would be if 5 or 6 Cheetahs players go down with COVID. Rugby is a contact sport, sweating or whatever, in the scrum time, like the virus is still, there's so many unknowns about how long it lasts on surfaces, carries, how the transmission of it in terms of, sweat on sweat, when guys are hitting rucks, etc. There's so much I don't want to play rugby for rugby's sake. I want to be safe, and I want to see the effect of this is more people going to the stadiums, more families going to the stadiums, to pack it out and to bring back that thing where we used to, you watch TV only as a last resort. If you can get to the game, you go to it because it's an occasion, it's a spectacle, because you love your players, you love your team, your environment, and that's where I want to see us going. I don't want to see more games played in this made for TV spectacle.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously there's plenty to talk about. Maybe our next insert will chat about, obviously, rugby going through a complete reboot, and whether we see competition in 2 months, 4 months, or 6 months, or even further. Probably our next chat will be about what we hope to see change in the game, and maybe there are certain things that will change for the better, and really kind of ensure that the game goes through a complete restructure, and we can have a look at that in our next chat.
Yeah, awesome. I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Cool.
Cheers.
Cheers.